This is another episode of 3D Printing News, Unpeeled, brought to you by 3dprint.com. So today we're going to be looking at two news items. One of them is, it's Asetek or Asetek and Fabricate Labs. So Fabricate Labs is a company that uses electrochemical additive manufacturing. So that's a kind of electroplating, electrodeposition type of way of making very fine, highly detailed copper or other metal parts. And a process that's very different than a lot of the thermal processes that we use in 3D printing more commonly to make metals especially. So these processes are suited to making really small parts, but perhaps doing this in a very scalable way with very, very fine details and very fine interior spaces and channels and things like that. They're really these electrochemical deposition technologies, there's a bunch of them in development, and Fabricate Labs is a very mature one relative to the other ones, but it's not a very mature technology when compared to powder bed fusion and other technologies out there. But it has the potential to make millions of parts, millions of quite small parts, but quite accurately. And of course, none of that residual thermal stress and relatively little post-processing. So it can do this really quite cost-effectively, and also in materials that are very highly in demand, like copper, and very difficult for us to do with these thermal processes, like powder bed fusion, laser, and other kind of processes. So, Fabricate Labs has always been a very exciting startup to a lot of people. It's not been a really startup that has been talked about enough, I think, given their capabilities. And this could be a huge breakthrough for them. And I think it's a very deserved breakthrough because they're working in this electronic space, like things like chip packaging, RF applications, stuff like that. And one successful component there could be, in the hundreds of thousands or millions. And that would already make it one of the most popular 3D printing components of all time. So we really need to pay attention to Boston Microfabrication, Fabricate Labs, but also like things like femtoprint and other processes that are kind of adjacent to this electronics market, because they could just explode really, really suddenly, and all of a sudden these guys could be a huge player in our market. Anyway, so what have these guys done? They've worked with a company called Asetek, or I don't know how to pronounce it, sorry, to create a better cold plate. So this cold plate has been optimized for better fluid dynamics, better heat dissipation, which is, of course, the most important characteristic of a cold plate, has been AI optimized. How wonderful is that? And then it's been made through 3D printing using Fabricate Labs process. Now, the really cool thing is that it is a remarkable improvement upon non-AI design, non-3D printed chips. So, if this is just a marketing thing and they did it as a wonderful exercise for a big, show, great. Good for them. Great case study. Wonderful. But if they can make this work and they can get consumers to pay for this optimized cold plate that has better performance, this could be potentially very, very significant for us and for our industry. Generally, however, we would expect that within a number of machine generations and a scaling up of their production facility, Fabricate Labs makes machines and the technology, and at the moment seems intent on deploying the technology itself through a service, which a lot of companies are doing now, because of course you capture continuous revenue, and it's actually much easier to just use your own machine kind of duct tape together to produce parts than it is to get a machine that works at the customer site, with all the problems with shipping and the customer operating it. So it's actually a faster go-to-market, and a lot of the startup-y type people are adopting this over just a traditional, like, let's make a machine, which will be more capital-intensive and take longer, obviously. Big day for our industry. I think it's a great thing. I think cold plates are a wonderful application. Anything kind of like that has flow in it. Electrical, RF, heat, whatever, liquid, whatever. Any kind of flow applications are wonderful applications for 3D printing. And here we're seeing this heat dissipation as a key characteristic. And if we can just make that a little bit better, that could be a super huge thing in this cold plate industry. Now, whether they would pay for it, they can make the volumes at the price and the quality they need, we don't know yet. But hey, it's a great step forward. The next thing is from Chef Pietro Catalano. He has a restaurant in Lucerne. It's called CAAA or CAAA or something like this. And that has been designed by an architecture firm called External Reference, and they're from Barcelona. Kind of intimate space, 16 couverts, 85 square meters. It's inspired by mountains. This, of course, makes a lot of sense. It's in Switzerland, Lucerne. And what they've done is they've used kind of a cellulosic kind of waste product, kind of a wood waste product, and then they've printed it. And that has led them to design a number of components in that space to make it a very highly customizable space for the architect. I think it's something that we don't talk about enough, but that could really be a very exciting thing for a lot of architects to have that kind of control over everything on the space. Now, of course, designing the ceiling as I did here or the walls is very possible, but you could also use the same material and the same things to kind of create a lot of other stuff, like the tables and the chairs and all this other stuff in the space. So I think this, when it becomes more known to interior designers and architects, will be a really driving force for doing this really special project, because the artist and the architect, let's say, could really take center stage and design the entire space exactly how she wants it, for example. And that can be very exciting. Anyway, so this space is designed by Mountains. The 3D printing component is the ceiling tiles. So a couple of interesting things. One, they use a waste material, absolutely wonderful, of course, great to claim as a restaurant also. Two, it's apparently, but they don't really talk about this in the information they put out, it would have to pass fire safety standards and things like that, which I think is really exciting if they did that. And the other thing is the process. And this is, they disclose this to say they go from mid-journey, so they use the AI stuff to do the first visualizations. When they like it, do further visualizations through 3D modeling. Then they pop it in simulation software, and then ultimately they CAD-CAM it and then 3D print it and then prototype with 3D printing and then make the final product. Now, the interesting thing about this is my process as well, and this is also the process that is emerging from designers and architects and engineers I work with. So the interesting thing for me is that when I really see AI being used in business, I know there's a lot of hype about it. My mind actually kind of tends to go to sleep when people mention it, because usually it is, just like blah, blah. But the one part of it that isn't blah blah is that using it as a prototyping tool, and I use that, and I think AI is super overhyped, and we have it'll take us years and years to figure out what's actually useful. But the one thing I know is useful is to use it as a prototyping tool. So I like the fact that these guys disclosed their workflow, and that it was very, very similar to my own workflow and very similar to the workflow of the people I work with. So that's kind of interesting. That's emerging. There's no one directing this as far as I know. But whereas a lot of people I know used to start with Lego or used to start with a little piece of paper, Post-its or whatever, or sketches like actual on paper, the AI thing is really taking over that a lot, sketching application at the moment. Mainly because it's really interesting if you're in a group and you want to share stuff. It makes it a little bit easier. Anyway, so after they do the 3D printing thing, they're happy with it. They make 80 by 80 centimeter modules. Now there's gaps in these modules, and the gaps allow the air conditioning to pass through. I think that's really nice. I think it also makes it much easier to make the ceiling. So I like that as well from a doability kind of perspective. If I'm the guy having to print this. But I like this idea of like not this blow of the air conditioning coming or seeing this grate of the air conditioning somewhere, but actually there being kind of a hidden air conditioning unit kind of wafts through. I don't know if it's true, but I want this to be true. But I like this. The 3D printing is done by La Máquina, which is like an agency with a story kind of thing. And they've been doing a lot of really, really cool projects, and they have a really enviable role, I think, in the 3D printing industry right now, in being at the intersection between architects, designers, brands, and the makeable. And their whole thing is like, you come to us with an idea, and we'll use a recycled, reusable, biological material to print out your thing. Is, I think, a really beautiful place to be. Imagine you're trying to sell like your Belane or whatever. You're trying to sell your eco-friendly material. To who, right? How many people in the world can actually use this to make a ceiling, right? Very few people. But enabling it by offering it as a service with a design service and with helping them also, not only as a design service like pitch your file to us, but a design service like, we'll work with ideas, we'll iterate with you, and we'll test out what works. I love this very much. I think this really makes our market grow much faster. And La Máquina has really been doing this for concept stores, bars, and hotels. And it's got a really, really beautiful place in the market, so I think that's fantastic. Anyway, my name is Joris Peels. This is an episode of 3D Print brought to you by 3dprint.com of 3D Printing News Unpeeled. I hope you found this